this isn't real. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
It probably is.
what was the guy who?
Alan Watts.
No, well, I mean, love Alan Watts, but like I think he was like a congressman that like sent a picture, like he got in trouble for like
Anthony
sending.
Weiner.
Yeah, his last name's Weiner.
Yeah.
Like that's a glitch in the simulation.
Yeah, it has to be.
You know what I mean?
It has
like
to be.
there's shit like that, like it's too real that it can't be real.
Yeah, yeah. What I've like been thinking about lately is just like the illusion of self. Because like I don't like there's this whole thing in like the wellness community of like ego being a bad thing, and I don't think it is. It's I think it's just kind of the illusion of self. And like when I question whether the self is like a real thing or not, or if it's just a thing I've constructed to make sense of things, there's something really liberating about that. I don't know. That maybe
Yeah.
was so not where you were going with it, but
No, I mean
yeah,
like
it's like
it all kind of falls into the same thing, I think. But I mean, as far as like the self goes, I think like it's fair to say like that it is like construction that like starts from like your birth. Like I feel like you're born
mm,
blank, you know? Like
yeah,
I mean,
totally.
I definitely believe in like universal unconsciousness, like where there's these underlying things that we all have like just from being human.
Yeah.
But like our ego and like, you know, Freud's superego and stuff like that, like it is a construct. And you know, there's also something to be said, I think, for like losing that.
Mm. As
But
we get
it
older and experience things, and like
yeah,
the world
or
starts to
like
wear
right.
down, and we start to acquire beliefs that maybe aren't ours, but
Right. No, absolutely. Or just like in the same sense, like losing, you know, experiencing an quote unquote ego death, you know,
mm,
and basically realizing, and whether that's through like the use of psychedelics or
yeah,
through like meditation, and that can come in a lot of different forms.
right.
In some ways, like psychedelics may get you there quicker, but there's
It did for me.
obviously potential like negative consequences in some aspects of psychedelics, like
Sure.
a lot of them not necessarily, but it depends on how you look at it and like how stable a person is. Like
So
you
many
can't
variables.
deny like that onset of schizophrenia, like whether that would have happened to the person initially or not.
That's true. That's true. That's why like with me, like with stimulants, when I initially started using them was when I was out in Vegas, and I was doing shooting up black tar heroin. That was like my drug of choice, and I couldn't find it when I just gotten out of like I think a treatment center after a while, um, and I found crystal meth, and I remember that same day I ended up finding the heroin, so I decided to do them together. And with something like that, like the combination of the two, it's interesting. But when this time around, so the last year and a half that I started using the stimulants again, but
Mm-hmm.
this time alone with some GHB in there, um, it was a total different experience. Right?
Happened. I don't know if you remember like that lady who was in the competition to for a radio show, like
Oh,
hold your pee
dude,
for a wee, and she drank.
was that part of the deal?
She basically drowned. Yeah, it was like a
Hold your
Nintendo
pee?
Wii. Yeah, how much water can you
Oh,
drink without peeing? And I mean, essentially like hyponatremia, like all your salt and electrolytes are just your water. You're
yeah,
basically drowning yourself. So
yeah. Oh,
someone can
that's
overdose
wild.
on water, like it's all in the dose. But as far as you were talking about like the stimulants, do you feel like I'm not sure like if this is where you were going with that, but I've heard people, I don't have personal experience on that end. I mean, on ADD medication
Yeah.
forever, but not really like meth use
I forgot about that.
for myself. But going up just kind of wasn't really my thing anyways, generally speaking. But did you find that stimulants like helped you? I mean, you said you found the heroin, but I've heard people using stimulants like to get through withdrawal,
Withdrawal from
like opiate
opiates.
withdrawal. Yeah.
Oh, no, I never use it in that context. No, for me, I don't like putting like labels on things or putting myself in boxes just because I I then kind of feel like that's another set of chains that I've just
Yeah,
put
yeah, for
onto
sure.
myself for no reason. It doesn't serve me
Well,
really.
you're not like any label or whatever, somebody
Yeah,
like you're not a diagnosis or whatever.
right, right. So, well, when I was like using the stimulants, it was initially started because like my I think go-to addiction I'd realized over time was like people.
Mm,
So for me, the stimulants just kind of came with companionship, and we were in the height of COVID, and so it just made sense to do because it was like the person that I was with was doing it, and um, there's some level of codependency there.
right.
I've always been like love avoidance, so I thought that's so not me. Like I'm not codependent, but being needed, like need to be needed, is definitely that. So anyway, like I started using the stimulants with the GHB, and it was a totally different experience than when I was um, basically just speedballing all the time.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because like I didn't realize I was really high a lot of the times. And then over time, um, my behavior started to change. Once I, and then a lot of stuff happened. But once I got into like a safe place where I could just use, um, just the meth, I realized that a lot of my like erratic behavior and all that stuff was really just what came with being in an unhealthy situation, an unhealthy environment, and
Hmm.
feeling judged all the time. Um, because once I was safe and I was using, I remember the people around me were just like, how are you smoking meth and like having a full meal or like taking a nap
Hmm.
after? And I realized that like a lot of the things and like the stereotype that like I thought I was like a walking like uh, well ultimately yeah I thought I was just like a walking crystal meth stereotype. A lot of that was just the anxiety of being in like our society that like
Hmm.
shuns it, the shame and all that stuff that like exacerbated all of like the negative feelings, hence the behavior that followed that. But once I was safe and was using, I it was a totally different thing. Like I just felt like
Right,
a person
right.
on Adderall.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
No,
weird,
absolutely. I
which
mean, I
surprised me.
think like I get that. Well, obviously because like we've had these like very particular like stigmas or association stereotypes placed on like specific substances. Like it's ingrained in us since like dare.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a lot of different philosophers and people who use drugs and psychedelics specifically often talk about like set and setting, but that like goes into all drug use, you know what I mean?
Pretty much,
And
yeah.
part of that is also expectations. Like the way a drug affects somebody is typically highly dependent upon the way they expect it to affect them. You know what I mean? So like if somebody is like has these very specific things in their mind about substances and like meth is going to make me naughty and stay up all night and like will have to binge and like can't use manageably because these are the things that are like in my mind about
Yeah,
it, like that I've been shown forever. Then oftentimes like it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that's there, you know what I mean? Like
definitely.
it's just the way, because these are the ways that it like we expect it to affect us. And I think, you know, that happens a lot with, I think, like opiates. You know, you're kind of in these days, and I'm not saying like for myself, like I just stay away from opiates at this point, but you
Me too.
know,
Yeah.
there's part of me that wonders like if I didn't have this kind of rhetoric like instilled into me that like opiates cause dependency. Like you use opiates on a regular basis, like you're gonna become dependent, you're gonna be addicted, and like you're gonna throw your life away. Like I oftentimes wonder like if things could have been different, like if I had any other option in my mind.
Right. That's an interesting one because I never really thought about that with the opiates. Like for me, I was abstinent for about I think 5 years or so after like kicking the heroin addiction, and I drew a line with like substances once I decided maybe abstinence isn't something that I want to do. And I won't know unless I
Mm-hmm.
try. And that was really enough for me. And so I drew a line with like heroin that like that's something I'm just not going to do just because of how it went for me. And I don't know, I kind of forgot what it was like, which is a good thing, I think, at least for now. Um, with the like stimulants, specifically crystal meth, I didn't have a line drawn with that because I never thought I'd see it again because I'm on the East Coast and for a
Right.
while like it was such like a West Coast thing for me.
That's
So
what you'd
like
think, right?
yeah.
It's
So like
around.
because I didn't have that like line where it's like with Coke, it's like, all right, I'll do this certain amount, but I'm not down to like start shooting really anything because I think ultimately that addiction is just for me, it's like I'm a very ritualistic person in that
Yeah.
sense as a drug user. So up water. So I was addicted to the needle. So for me, needle hard no. For right now, right? And so when I was faced with like GHB, which is something that again I also never thought I'd see. I didn't really know what to expect. And so yeah, when we fall into like what we think something is gonna be, um, yeah, we can definitely give into that. And then there's things that reinforce that, including other drug users, which is super disappointing, but I get it. Like,
Well, they're in the same place, right? Like
yeah,
they have those expectations too.
totally.
They
And like
fall into them.
people, governments, like there's been a lot of money that's been spent on the propaganda and all the stuff to reinforce these beliefs, kind of like I said earlier, like that really aren't ours. And like for
Mm.
us to sometimes question, like, wait a minute, is this something that like I think, or is this just something that was taught? And whichever it is, like right now, me today, presently, do I believe this, or am I just hanging on to it because I don't know, it's familiar, it's what I know.
Right.
And the thing that I'm like so fucking grateful for is having a safe space to use before I, uh, I think I felt like pressure to make a decision. Either I'm using and I'm going to be a fucking insane person, or I go to treatment, get sober, and be abstinent. And like neither of those really sounded particularly appealing.
Mm.
I knew like the way things were going when I did have like erratic behavior, um, and like I was homeless, like just everything was falling apart. I was like, that's something I'm not really cool with continuing. But does it have to be black or white? And I found a space where there's gray area, and I realized a lot of the shit that was going on was just a direct result of, like I said, my environment. And also, um, yeah, I think the narrative of, or whatever the narrative is that made me kind of like have this like instilled shame, uh, feelings of guilt. Yeah, and like once I was able to like shed that, which was really only through other people being patient with me,
Right.
um, I realized like, oh fuck, like I'm really not like a piece of shit ultimately. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not um insane. Like I'm not like I feel like society kind of gaslights us. And like
Yeah.
it's so freeing to realize like, oh wait a minute, like I'm a person and like I
Yeah,
can still
100%.
fucking do things
I
and like
mean, we all are, even the people that like genuinely do, because like you can't like we're not trying to deny that there are people who, regardless of this like stigma and stuff, like there's a small percentage of people who like just have that in them and they're like are gonna
yeah,
fall into it, but
for sure.
just the way that it is perceived in our society and like we were saying, I think it really greatly kind of increases everything and then also potentiates like everything for the people who maybe would have had a substance use disorder regardless.
Totally.
But I mean, you talking about like questioning your beliefs and like, are these mine and are these just what society has kind of instilled? I think that's really a big part of kind of why we're trying to have these conversations because, we do have these ingrained beliefs. And like, I catch myself like thinking, like, well, you know, random things that I know about drugs because like this is what I've read about them, this is what I've been told about them, and there's certain things like that are facts. Like GHB used on a regular consistent basis, like
Mhm.
physical dependency like can be pretty quick. Like that's just the way that is. But
Honestly, didn't know that.
physical, yeah, right. So it's important to know these things, like
Yeah.
because and it works it works on the GABA receptors, so similar to like alcohol
Fascinating.
and benzodiazepines. But
Jeez.
regardless, like like it's important to know like the facts about a substance, but it's also like
Mhm.
the way that this substance is going to affect me or my life, like shouldn't be just determined by what we're told by society or in dare class, and I think like
Definitely.
that's why we want to have these conversations and kind of like be able to talk about the ways that maybe some of those like stereotypes are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to also hold space for the fact that, like, there's no right or wrong way or right or wrong beliefs, of course. And I think it actually like makes sense for beliefs to change and evolve over time as we like acquire more life experience and then also just more information. Like you just told me a thing about G that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like things can fluctuate. I think everything is really fluid. And so when we think about like ourselves as drug users, self perception and all that stuff, like that can waver. And I think it should. I think
Hmm.
it'd be kind of fucking weird if it didn't. And I was just talking to somebody recently about the fact that like there are little things about like using in this case like stimulants that I find like so much comfort in just knowing it's like a thing and it's not just me. I used to get shamed for like um or be met with a lot of impatience because I liked to like take my backpack and take everything out of it and then repack it a certain way. Like I like my little gadgets, like I like and that's such a stereotype too, but always been into like weird techie things. Um and I just there's like I don't know, something about like unpacking and repacking my shit super soothing. Don't know why,
Yeah,
but
I
like
get it.
the environment that I was in when I like it wasn't like the great situation, I'd get like kind of made fun of for it or like
Mm,
shamed or like just like, oh, like, why are you sprawling all your stuff out? And it made me feel really fucking dumb, which I already like
mm,
am inclined to feel with my ADHD, which is a whole other topic. Um, but I watched this YouTube video. I think it was like a project somebody did for like a college course. And in there, they were just interviewing stimulant users. I think the subject matter was just like stimulant induced psychosis or paranoia,
mm,
um, and they listed things that were helpful and not helpful. And the reason I know they actually spoke to real stimulant users was a person mentioned like the backpack thing, which I did not know like I shared. And so
mhm.
when I was just like, there's some comfort in knowing like, oh
Yeah.
fuck, there's like first off nothing wrong with me. Well, there is, but not in that regard. It's not my fucking backpack habits. And another thing I think is a common misconception that this video in particular helped me realize is that when people express concern, it's awesome because it's well intentioned and it's I'm
Mm,
lucky that people give a fuck, but also it's a trigger for me. Um,
hmm.
because when we think about people that use any drugs, like, what do you think they hear
Yeah, all the
all the
time.
fucking time
Right,
from every angle in different deliveries?
right.
Usually not very nice ones. Um, and so I remember I used to be hard on myself for like not handling concern or not accepting it gracefully. And I realized all I needed really was just a fucking a friend and just
Yeah.
someone to like not pass judgment. I don't want unsolicited advice. I just want like just non-judgmental, just be there for me and just care. But like the everyone thinking that they know better, especially coming from other drug users, because there's this weird hierarchy that we have with drugs. Like these are okay, these aren't.
Yeah,
That's super
yeah. I
unhelpful.
know.
So
Yeah, there's definitely like perceived stigma. Like with specific substances, and like people kind of place them on like this is less harmful. Like I mean at this point, like cannabis is so like regular and like permeating throughout society, that which is great. Like I'm all for it, but it's also very much like, yeah, weed's fine, like you can't hurt you, but like all these other drugs, no. And there's definitely like, you know, there's a term, psychedelic exceptionalism, where basically like there's maybe a group of people that advocate for more sensible drug policy, but it's very much directed to like these substances, like, you know, Oakland legalized or decriminalized entheogens, so like naturally occurring psychedelics, so, you know, mushrooms and ibogaine, like
I didn't know that.
yeah, they were like one of the first. They've decriminalized psychedelics in other states now, Oregon specifically, and actually Oregon has legalized kind of everything, I believe.
Or decriminalized, maybe.
Decriminalized, yeah, but without like any kind of psychedelic exceptionalism, I guess. But there is like a faction of people who advocate for like the legalization or decriminalization of psychedelics, but these other drugs, more stigmatized substances, like there's no effort on that, at least in that group of people, which obviously, like, in terms of degrees of potential harm, there are different factors, but like those harms are highly increased and almost always caused by the prohibition. Like, you know, diacetylmorphine, which is what heroin is, like alone, I mean, it's used, diamorphine is used in hospitals in Europe. Like, it's a common pain medication. If you go in and like break your leg, like there's a good chance you're getting diamorphine. Heroin, but you're not getting the same stuff that you're going to get from somebody on the street, which, you know, like is just a result of prohibition. I mean, if we had a safe supply of all these different substances, I mean, you know, I know of people who at this point kind of prefer fentanyl, but mostly because that's just what will kind of get them to where they want to be with their tolerance, because it was fentanyl. But, you know, generally speaking, people kind of prefer like heroin. Like fentanyl is kind of, it's said like it's all the sedation and none of the euphoria, like in my experience.
I didn't know that. I don't think I've ever done it. I've never done heroin like down here. And when I started hearing about fentanyl, it wasn't until like after I'd stopped using it, wasn't part of like the conversation.
Right. And I mean, the only reason fentanyl exists is because like heroin's illegal. I mean, things don't get into not exist, but exist in the illicit drug supply, I should say. Obviously fentanyl exists. I mean, like it's used in anesthesia and all that, but the reason it's in the drug supply now is because of prohibition on drugs. And I mean, when they started shutting down on the pill mills, then, I mean, it's not like people weren't dying on the pill mills, but a lot of that was like common drug interactions, which is also a result of people not having the education about the drugs they're using. So like it wasn't that common. I mean, it happened, but for people to like overdose just on OxyContin, it was more often than not OxyContin, Xanax, and like Soma or some muscle relaxer. And that's a lack of knowledge and a lack of education.
And also poor like just journalism. Like there's that.
For sure.
Like people, I don't know. Because of like that, like the narrative being kind of like so off from what in actuality is actually happening. The misinformation is like, you know, it's one thing to just like be apathetic because like, I don't know, whatever. It is a kind of a privilege to like give a fuck about certain things if you're worried about like having a roof over your head. I get all that stuff. But like when it comes down to it, like how common drug use is, for a lot of this shit to not be common knowledge is, I mean, never mind my personal feelings on it, but it's just objectively harmful. So like that's why I'm more than happy to do something like this and just sit down and just talk about drugs, because I don't see people doing it, and it's always this hush hush thing. Like you're either like scum of the earth piece of shit, you got nothing going for you, everything like fell apart, which like been there in kind of like getting out of it right now.
Yeah.
But like,
Right.
or you're just like a dude that got a job promotion that does like coke on the weekends to celebrate with your coworkers, but like don't tell anybody outside of this little circle. Or outside of this bathroom. Like, it's so weird.
Oh, it's totally like hush hush and kept in the dark. And like,
and it's like,
we
why?
have it also leads or shapes the perceptions. Like it reinforces the perceptions that we have on them, because we don't get like an idea of how many people actually use drugs, like, and don't have like serious negative consequences. But oftentimes the negative consequences that do happen with those people is just a result of lack of education on like the drugs they're using, like people not knowing that they maybe if they just use cocaine casually, they still should have like Narcan around. And, you know,
like
if they're getting cocaine from the streets, then they should have, you know, fentanyl testing strips, Narcan. A lot of people don't have the knowledge that there's fentanyl that shows up in cocaine and methamphetamine. Like, it happens.
I had no idea. Yeah. Like when I was handed fentanyl testing strips, I was like, but I don't use heroin. Like, that was my response.
Right.
And then like knowing that there's still a potential, and like it's not something that had occurred to me, but before it was brought up, because I don't know why would it? And so I think it's important to like, there's like a responsibility on us as like drug users to like educate ourselves, of course, but like societally, when we're moving in a totally different direction and it doesn't align with like being more informed, it's just not fucking helpful. So like it's something that I feel strongly about, not because I'm a drug user, but because I saw the effects and the drastic shift in myself personally once I realized like, oh, like I can do this and I can do this safely and I can do this and I can be not judged and I can do this and like have what I need to make sure that like it's done right. Like, fuck,
sure.
Like that's cool. Like there's no pity party. There's no like committee that needs to agree with me. It's just, I don't know. It's so liberating. It's such a simple thing. And I knew about this. I've been to like needle exchanges and all that stuff, like, you know, when I was using heroin. And so I was aware that harm reduction was a thing and I was on board. But like, it's really not until I saw how like, just how drastically helpful it was that like, it shifted from intellectually knowing this is a good thing and like I like the idea to like, holy shit, like this saved me. Like I thought I was going fucking insane. Meanwhile, it's just like I've just been alienated by like the world and thought like there was something inherently wrong with me for everything, and drugs being a big part of that.
I mean, like you're kind of given like two options, right? Like you're given like chaotic substance use, like bottom of the gutter, or clean, you know, which I hate when people use the word clean, but I mean, like it infers that somebody was dirty at any point, and you know, I certainly don't believe that. But like by society, you're given those two choices, like in large part without like the acknowledgement, because of what we were saying, like it's regular drug use, like that definitely happens, is kept under wraps. People don't want to talk about it. And so like that leads to, you know, you were saying earlier, like when people express concern, like it can be, you know, like on one hand, like you're glad that somebody cares enough to express that concern, but on another, like it can be triggering, and it can almost seem like what I'm hearing is, I mean, for sure. What tell me if I'm right, but like what I'm hearing is kind of like a lot of that concern isn't necessarily based in fact, and it's based on assumption. And, you know, whether it's like what they're seeing or like what they're perceiving based on like what they think about drug use. And like this is where you're headed, without like any possibility of, you know, like, well, maybe looking at, because, you know, we haven't talked for too long, but so I don't know maybe where you are in these points when people are expressing concern. But like if you're like stable and have like a solid life or shit going on, you know, is the any acknowledgement of that, or is it just concern about like, I know where I see you going, you know what I mean?
It can be both. And like when somebody acknowledges like, oh, like I see you're doing better, it doesn't really absolve like the shitty feeling of like, but this and this.
Mhm.
And it's like, hey dude, like nice of you to like check in, but also, I mean, unsolicited advice, A, but also B, like you're saying that as if I don't know what is in my best interest. And like, it's a little,
Right.
I take this shit with a grain of salt and I don't take a lot personally, but it's like, what it implies is that this person, despite not being in my shoes or not knowing, or maybe just scratching the surface with like knowing what I've been through, it implies that they, with their very limited knowledge, know better than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And like, do I think, putting chemicals in my body that like are objectively pretty like can be harmful, right, to like our brains and shit, do I know that that's like bad, harmful? Like, yeah, I fucking know that. It's like we all do shit that's not in our best interest. All the time. Like, hey, remember when you spent like a shitload of money on this like arbitrary thing?
Right.
That probably wasn't in your best interest. You probably also knew that and you chose to do it anyway. You're free to choose to do that. Just like I'm free to choose to do like whatever it is I choose to do.
Yeah.
So there's like a part of it that's like, if I were more in my feelings, I'd probably find like kind of insulting. But like, it's just, yeah, it's kind of like, I was talking to somebody about this recently. It reinforces this feeling of like I'm a child, and because I'm not doing the same drugs as this person who's giving me advice, like they are my parent, and it's like a weird, like a weird dynamic. It's because it's usually like peers, you know, it's like my friends or people that I hang out with or that I did coke with yesterday. Like,
yeah,
and that's the weird part about it, and I know it's not like. There's no ill intent, but that doesn't make me feel less weird.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to highlight about that is if it's truthfully about my best interest, I'm telling you that these conversations of concern with your limited knowledge on like my situation is making me uncomfortable. So for you to continue to do that, despite me saying, hey, this is really bringing up a lot of shit for me, like, can you not? Is it really about my best interest? Because I'm telling you, it's like kind of hurting me right now. So like, there's that, and people don't really want to look at that side of things.
Well, it's
just
not
because
like
they mean well.
Yeah. I mean, they mean well for sure, but it's not like they're like coming to you and saying like, "Hey, Ivana, like, is there anything that like I could do to like help you out, like, or how are you doing?" Like, being offered like just like in terms of harm reduction, offer the supplies to be able to use safely and like the knowledge to be able to use safely, like just somebody coming to another person like, hey, how can I help, like if in any way, and no, like, if not, then cool, like if it's not needed. But I do think, at least in my experience, and like it kind of sounds like this, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like especially people in recovery or people who have struggled or experienced chaotic substance use and then like no longer use, or like use, like we were saying, like substances that maybe are like less stigmatized or is viewed as like okay, but not these other things, they can almost be more judgmental or kind of like hard about like telling you what you should be doing or where you should be than just somebody almost with no experience, which is kind of interesting.
It is, because it's a lot of like projection, I think. And I never really think that is the intention. Like, hey, I'm going to project all of my shit and my past experience onto this person. Like, but again, I think intentions really doesn't absolve like the thing that's actually happening. Because like what's actually happening is like all the trauma and all the shit that they've been through, I'm now for some reason paying for it. And that sounds dramatic and like I don't, but no, it's just like there's so much of it, and it's just like, dude, for sure. I don't know. I got nothing.
No, I mean, definitely people like project their own trauma onto other people and then like traumatize people because of their trauma. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
happens often.
And we're all guilty of it, totally. But I think like it's everybody kind of wanting you to be, or to operate on their timeline. So it's like, let's say like, I stop using a certain substance, and then I move on to using something else, like let's say from like methamphetamine to like Adderall, which frankly is preferred. But it's like no matter the progress, if it's not really at that person's standard, it's not enough. And it's like, wait a minute, like I thought we were friends. I didn't know like I had to like meet standards. You probably didn't either, you know, to the person that it's coming from. But that is what it kind of comes off as. And it's like my progress or my regression, however it is I'm doing, is going to happen on my timeline. And I think it's a little weird when people think it should happen on theirs.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that's like a majority of like where like my fiery like anger or whatever resentment comes from. Is it's like, hey dude, like my shit isn't gonna happen at the time or however you want it to happen. If it's about me getting better, then like let it be about that. But if it's about your feelings or your security within your own sobriety, then like let's call it for what it is.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, and that's not uncommon, right? Like it's not like that situation is like this rare thing that like, you know, one out of a handful of people like you're probably experiencing that with. I mean, I can't say for you, but that's kind of the general like reaction that people get. Like people, especially people close to them, like yeah, even for myself, I think for anybody, if they're honest with themselves, can say like, it's much easier to like, when you're distant, you know, like if it's just a person, even like if it's an acquaintance or like somebody you're just trying to help, but you don't have like, it's not a family member or like a friend that you've had for a long time where you have like a personal, like deep personal relationship with, it's so much easier to just like let them be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I've had experiences with family members or whatever, where like I work in harm reduction. Like my recovery is harm reduction. Like I you know, I'm all about it. But when it comes to like a family member or somebody that like I'm very close to, I even catch myself like, come on, man, like what are you doing? Or like, you know, it's harder. And I also have to like understand that too. It doesn't make it like okay or the way it should be, but like I can see that in myself, like that it's harder for me if I'm in that person's shoes too, to like let them be, because and at the core, like at least it definitely is going to feel like they think they know what's best, and maybe they do, but I doubt it's like a conscious thing. You know, I can't say, but it's like reflexive, and it's reflexive again. It goes back to like the ideas and stigmas that we have on substances, and like so this is just what's ingrained, and like
especially like, do you have a 12-step background?
Yeah, mildly. You know, I never was completely abstinent, but I went through the 12 steps. I like utilized AA. Like I was on MAT, buprenorphine maintenance, and have used like medical cannabis throughout my recovery. But I did like use the 12 steps, and there was like a helpful fellowship called MARA, Medication Assisted Recovery Anonymous, that like a good buddy of mine and I kind of like started a meeting and a few meetings in Palm Beach County and kind of got like that fellowship going and stuff.
That's so cool.
So that was helpful, but I had to like pick and choose like the meetings that I was in, because even just like being very much like about like I'm doing this, I want to like be involved and I want to like work the steps, I want to like improve myself. Like I would be in meetings where people were even if it wasn't like blatant outright, like talking shit about like subs or MAT or whatever, like under the table, like, it was inferred, like, or implied, I should say, in a lot of like their shares and stuff. And I would just not go to those meetings. But, once Mara really kind of like picked up, I kind of just pulled away from AA. I did work like the steps with a sponsor who was really just like my best friend. And so it wasn't like the same kind of like, they're like with a sponsee, even though like technically their whole job is supposed to just be taking them through the steps. A lot of times they take on the role of life coach and relationship coach and all these different things, which, my understanding isn't what it's supposed to be. But then there's like this power dynamic, and
Totally.
I was fortunate enough to not like experience that and not have to experience too much of like the stigma. Like I was always encouraged by the people that I was around. And, I say this often, like if I didn't have like people having my back and telling me or like encouraging me, like, and basically reaffirming that I am in recovery, like I'm doing the thing, I'm just not doing it the same way as somebody who's like going the abstinent route. I don't know if I would have taken the same path. I don't know if I would have stuck with what I stuck with.
Right.
Just because like if I was constantly hearing, if you're not doing it this way, then you're not doing it right, or you're not doing it at all, whatever, I just wouldn't have done it.
Right. And I think that's like where a lot of like people feel turned away. And like I love AA and the 12 steps and Big Book, like what it was intended to be. And I don't know everything about it. I don't feel like I need to. It's helped me immensely. However, people have a tendency of kind of like ruining things when they get together in groups, because we have anything like egos organized. And like, anything from like AA to like organized religion to really anything.
100%.
And so I think we see a lot of that. And I think that turns people away from like the idea of getting sober to begin with. If they're like, in the murky waters of like kind of wanting to, but like being a little afraid, that like maybe rigidity, which helps a lot of people, can also really backfire, especially with like a my way or the highway approach. And like I have, seen people that were just sponsors like take on those roles as like life coach and relationship coach and fucking physician, which is crazy to me. And I feel so strongly about that, because like with like my own shit with like mental illness and close friends of mine, like having been told like you need to get off of these meds, otherwise you're not sober.
So dangerous.
Is super fucking dangerous. Yeah, I've seen so many people have like suicide attempts, and like just all the shit because they were off of the meds that they like needed. And so we can't, while like, substance use does bleed into a lot of different areas of life, we can't act like just because somebody's using, all of a sudden everything outside of what really a sponsor or a home group or whatever, what doesn't jive with that is like wrong. And I think that's like super dangerous, also really just kind of weird. So I don't know, like I think the most helpful thing that I found was realizing that my recovery is mine. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's, because it's mine and I get to make that call. And it's just off-putting when people have like a sense of entitlement to what my recovery is supposed to look like. Like, I don't know, I just think it's fucking weird.
Yeah, no, it is. And like, I don't know, sometimes I try to like tell myself that this person is just like it's projection or whatever, or I've heard people say, well, like they're just jealous because they want to like be able to like use this or that casually, and I don't really buy into that. I just think on one hand, like I can understand it, like I don't accept it, but like so I say this all the time, but it's like religion. Like, I mean, we were talking about like people corrupt these things, and definitely organized religion falls under the same category. But in a program like AA or NA or whatever, people who utilize those programs and like stuck with them and like that's the path that they took, they genuinely feel, and rightly so, that this saved their life.
Yeah.
So just like somebody who is like practicing of a religion genuinely feels that like God saved their life or whatever it is that they practice.
Yeah.
I mean, people have literally been killing each other over that since the beginning of time, right? Like religion, like that's what most of the wars historically have been based on. I mean, religion and just trying to conquer land, and yeah, women fall into that too, for sure.
But mostly religion, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so considering that, it's not that kind of surprising, I guess, that people take such a hard stance, like this is the way it has to be, because like they probably feel threatened. Like if somebody can possibly do it different than me, was my way the right way in the first place? Like, you know what I mean?
Like an insecurity could be there possibly. That and or because something saved their life, they're fucking stoked.
Yeah.
And like want to just share it with everyone. And that's awesome. But again, like we need to hold space for like the fact that like, okay, cool. Like, so abstinence saved your life. When I was feeling suicidal, guess what saved mine? Fucking heroin.
Yeah.
Like that's what kept me from killing myself. And it's like, we don't talk about that. I'm sure I'm not alone in that sentiment. So it's like, if for the time being, somebody needs to do a thing, a substance, whatever, and that's what prevents them from like not wanting to wake up in the morning, fucking yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And it shouldn't just be like tolerated. Like I've heard from people in various like recovery communities who, you know, maybe they get to the point that like they can say, you know, yeah, okay, like if you want to like do recovery this way or like keep using this substance or that substance, that's okay. But it's always like followed up with like a but, and it's like it's not good enough. It's not all the way. It's not. But like, why does what they have like? There are tons of people, I guarantee, that like abstinence just isn't going to work for. Like it's not even just, and people have the right to not want abstinence, and they have the right to decide that that's not like what their, you know, goal is.
Yeah.
But also there's going to be people who just can't do it. Like it just doesn't work for them, whether like they need to be on some type of medication assisted treatment or just like they need to be able to use drugs because like for whatever reason, you know,
definitely
it shouldn't be like viewed as less than. It's just a different path.
Right. Yeah. And like I think you like started to allude to this too, like needing it is definitely one thing, and then I think simply just wanting a different life or wanting a different recovery path is enough. It's kind of like we see this a lot in like romantic relationships. Like sometimes somebody wants out and they're looking for something wrong in their partner or a problem just so that can be like their ticket to like justify ending something significant or not. But like, you know, really at the end of the day, all you need is just the desire to not be in that anymore. And that's good enough. And like, it's weird because societally, like, we don't really get told that. Like sometimes just wanting to do something else and recognizing that it's your life to do whatever you want with, so long as it like really doesn't harm other people directly, like that should be fucking enough. You know, and it doesn't seem like it is for a lot of people, and that's fine. That's really their problem, but it becomes mine when it's like imposed on me. And so I just try to not, I just try to be mindful of my own biases. We all have like pasts and stuff and memories, and that all bleeds into like who we are today. Be weird if it didn't. But just to have that like self-awareness, I think is important. And, also just recognizing our own autonomy over our own lives, and
And
for other
everyone
people.
else's. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just respect at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think that, like, at least for myself, like, that's really what I'm looking for. Is just respect. That's it.
Yeah. And that's totally reasonable. I
Yeah.
think that's
Well,
everybody
you'd think.
deserves that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are you at now with things? Like,
I'm a drug user.
Yeah. Okay. So
I
can you tell me
don't.
about that?
Yeah, totally. So it's weird to put into words. I don't think I've really thought about it.
Yeah, it's not something that is talked about a lot, you know,
Yeah.
especially, you know, like on a camera.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm here. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I use drugs recreationally, and like my background, like not too long ago, I was using like habitually methamphetamine and GHB, but like I never had like physical withdrawals, and I used to do it every night, so I don't really know what that's about. Maybe it was the continued
Maybe
stimulant use.
time enough distance between.
Maybe yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a bunch of variables. I'll still do it from time to time if I like can't sleep or the situation calls for it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't feel like I'm in like the depths of like despair. I'm a weird addict, and like I definitely am one, but I also feel weird saying that because, you know, there's these like standards that like if you don't meet these certain things, then like you must not be an addict, or you think you're different. And it's like I differ from what these like guidelines say. That doesn't make me any less of an addict, or maybe it does. I don't fucking know. But yeah, no, I use drugs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were talking about it earlier. I don't remember if we were rolling or not yet, but like labels, you know, and like being
like
labeled.
boxes.
Yeah. And I mean, addict is a label too. And like we fall into it ourselves. And, you know, like I used to like, you know, if I was in the right setting in the conversation, like identify as an addict, and I just don't do it anymore because like, you know, I'm not, like I've had experience with chaotic substance use, you know, substance use disorder, all of that, but like that's not who I am. It's not who you are. It's not who anybody is.
It's very minimizing.
Yeah,
like
and
just
we
like the human fucking experience. Which I'm kind of mad at myself for saying the human experience. But
I mean, well, yeah, it is what it is. That's what it is. There's not really other words you can put on it.
Yeah. So like it depends on the context. Like if I'm talking to certain friends, like I can nonchalantly refer to myself as like an addict. Because they know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it.
But like I'm just a person, and I use drugs from time to time, sometimes more often than not. And that's kind of really it. I think like my drug use started as a way to kind of like deal with like well, I think it was curiosity, and then I realized it was very effective in like dealing with some of like my traumas and like just things I didn't want to like think about or feel, and I didn't know how else to like manage. So for the time being, it was really two escapes were drugs and music for me. Because it was just a way to be elsewhere while still being here. You know?
Is there like, do you get a benefit from any of the substances that like you use currently? Is it just for fun, or is it like both?
It's both. It's both. Usually, lately, it's not so much just for fun. It's usually like I have things I need to do, and I have untreated ADHD. So like, you know, I'll still catch myself being hard on myself if like I can't get things done and they seem so simple. And then like I have this like internal monologue of like, oh, this is such a simple thing. I should be able to make this phone call and get this thing done. But I can't. Why can't you? And like it turns into this whole thing. And then I can like take Adderall or whatever, along with like do some yoga and like just really just at the end of the day, it's like let me see, like, what is it that would make my life a little bit easier right now? Like, what are the things I can do or take or whatever? And then I do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more for utility these days, but like, yeah, I'll party. Like that,
Right on.
you know, that's actually, I don't even think that would be a separate category now that I think of it, because I think unwinding is also important. The many different
for
ways
sure.
of
Yeah,
achieving
everybody
that.
has different ways of unwinding, relieving stress.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take any like steps or measures or do anything to like reduce potential harms or consequences, or like, you know, like choosing to use Adderall over methamphetamine, or like any other fentanyl test strips, any things that you do to possibly like mitigate?
So those are the things mostly.
Yeah.
Because I have fentanyl test strips, and I am starting to get access to like Adderall through a doctor and stuff. So that's cool. Like that's a step in the direction that I want to go to, because it's, for me, the goal is to just make my life a little bit easier and not hurt myself in the process.
Right.
But yeah, aside from that, not really. I mean, I try to be mindful of like the source and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
There's really only so much that can be done today, at least with what we have to work with. But
I mean, have you ever like do you use like MDMA or anything?
Yeah.
Like, do you like test, like reagent testing?
I don't know what that is.
No. So basically like reagents, I mean, there's more advanced ways of testing a substance, like mass spectrometer, gas chromatographer stuff, like super expensive machinery that'll tell you exactly like what's in it, how much, all that good stuff.
Chicago.
Yeah, like Dance Safe has one. There's some pretty cool like projects out there that use them. Like they'll take them to festivals and stuff, and people can test their substance. Yeah, it's dope. And there's like data out there of like people who bring a substance and it's not what they were told it was, and sometimes they're like it's ketamine and not cocaine, and they're like, dope, like I'll take some K. But other times it's like some cathinone instead of MDMA, like mephedrone, or like something that they don't want, you know, and like they'll leave it. And there's like a good bit of instances where people like find that the drug is a potentially harmful substance, or just not what they're looking for, and just like won't take it. But reagent testing, basically, like there's a series of different, they're called reagents, and they're just like fluid in a little bottle, and there's different ones, Marquis, Mac, Freud. So like you take a tiny bit of the substance, drip like 1-2 drops of that reagent onto it, and there's like a chart that it'll change color.
Like pH test strips.
Kind of, yeah. Okay. I mean, like you're not using test strips, you're going just on the color. But yeah, in the same way, like when you test pH, like you're looking at the color on a chart. Yeah. It's the same principle. So like the liquid that you drop on there, if it's MDMA, like a Marquis will go from like light purple to dark purple to black relatively quickly. And there's different, like, you know, I'd have to look at a chart to remember all of them, but like there's ways of ruling out. Like, so a couple things could turn purple to black other than MDMA. It's like MDA. So then you use another reagent to differ between MDMA and MDA. That's what so it doesn't tell you amount or anything like that, but it tells you the presence of a substance. And so like if you're getting like Molly, and there's a lot of other stuff that's sold as Molly out there, it can tell you like at least that there's MDMA in here, or that there's something else like a piperazine that can be really harmful.
I did like that.
PPAs, they're not a good time.
Oh, wait, PPAs?
Like piperazines, yeah, like PPA, PPA, or PMA, PMAs and PMMAs. Yeah, they're not a good time. People, you know, there's a lot of the instances of people dying like from MDMA, it's either a result of them, again, not like taking steps to educate themselves, and like there's different resources out there like pill reports. You can,
Yes.
look up your pill. There's a chance that it was counterfeited. It's a different pill, but like at least initially, like with
Love that
press
shit.
ecstasy, yeah. So it'll tell you, the general dosage when people send those pills in to get tested, because there's those services out there. People
Right.
don't take those steps, and so a lot of like the ecstasy pills coming out of like Ireland and the Netherlands today, they're dosed at like 250, 300 milligrams.
Yeah.
Which like an average dose of generally like good dose of MDMA is like 125 milligrams, and that's kind of like at the top end.
Right.
People are taking a whole one, maybe two, because they're hearing about, they're hearing about somebody like in the 90s who were taking 2-3 rolls when they were like 70 to 80 milligrams, and then they take a couple and it's maybe 600 milligrams of MDMA at once, and they overheat. That's where problems come in. The other instances are when it is like a drug contaminant like PMAs or PMMAs, which are like piperazines, which can be harmful, cause all sorts of different like issues.
That's what we don't want.
No.
So I have been like on the Pill Report website, and then I remember when I was using heroin in the Northeast. So I'm from New Jersey. So there was a website. I don't know if it's still around, but like it was the same idea. It was just with
like the stamps. Yeah.
When I went out west, and it was just tar sold in like little balloon bags, I didn't have access to like any type of harm reduction. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind, and I didn't know as much about it. But I that hadn't even occurred to me that is a sense or like a form of harm reduction, is like looking those things up, albeit not always like the most reliable because of these changing variables. Those are super fucking important resources to know that are out there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then as far as you were talking about like testing the Molly, I did do that recently, and it's fucking really cool, and I would love to know everything else that's in it, because I think that's really what we'd want to know. But I think it's just like a lack of access to a lot of resources that prevents a lot of people from moving forward with harm reduction. Like A, it's having knowledge that harm reduction is a thing, but then also B, just having access. I think more people would be implementing these practices if it were something that were actually accessible, and you don't have to like, spend a bunch of money to send shit to a lab somewhere. Like, I think that's
pretty hefty price oftentimes.
Yeah. And like most people I know that use drugs are probably not trying to like drop that much money on like
potentially
just,
Yeah.
So I think that's why like the access is like such a vital part, because even people I know that are like, I don't know about harm reduction, they are so down to test their shit, because they want to know what they're doing, what they're selling, but for one reason or another, and it's helpful at the end of the day. So
no, I think like drug contaminant testing can be really key. I mean, I've had bad experiences with pressed ecstasy pills that were most certainly piperazines, and college, and it was like all night, instead of like having a good time and like having that empathogen effect. Like it was like me just going back to the apartment and like rocking back and forth in my bed, like feeling like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. It's not a good time. And I never used any kind of substance, like, well, after that, particularly ecstasy, that I didn't test because of that experience.
Got it.
And like, that was really before I knew like the buzzword of harm reduction or anything like that. I just knew like, I don't want this to happen again. And, it's not worth it if I can't make sure that it won't happen again.
Right.
So, reagent testing, it could be more available for sure. But, it's, you can order it online, and, I know of people that have access to it. I have access to it. So
that's awesome.
If there's ever any instance, we can always, I'll point you in the right direction at least, or help you out,
Yeah. And
it's
like,
good to know.
Yeah, for sure. For myself, and then just like, other people that I know that are drug users. Because like I said, it's like, you don't have to be like super into like I don't know, or feel passionate or strongly about issues surrounding drug use to just want to not die, you know, and know what you're consuming.
Right.
So yeah, that's
I mean,
awesome.
nobody should have to die because they want to change the way that they feel,
Right.
you know, and I think, I don't know, there's just like that perception that any people who use drugs are like addicted to drugs, and like we were talking about earlier, because, and again, especially amongst people in recovery, because like that's their experience. Like I've had chaotic substance use. It's easy for me to project that like somebody else who uses maybe the substances I was using chaotically is going to also experience that. And then when we get ourselves in a bubble, like in the rooms or whatever, and that's all we interact with are other people who have like, they're only there because they had to get help, because like they also experience chaotic substance use.
Yeah.
But if like we kind of took a step back and looked at like the whole world and how many people do use drugs, like just use cocaine on the weekends or take MDMA, like whether it's just for fun or therapeutically. And there's definitely, you know, a lot of, you know, MAPS is like on their trial 3 or phase 3 trials of their MDMA studies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, they like do therapy like in combination with it, and the next day do like processing. It's pretty effective, especially for PTSD.
Yeah. It's something. I mean, and then this is a whole other discussion, but like shit like that, I know that there's a lot of people that are interested in it, but because of the state of things, and health insurance not recognizing that as like, you know, just it not being FDA approved, all the variables that fall into that not being, again, accessible, is really fucking harmful. And so there's really just something to say about that, because I think whether you want to get clean, whether you want to be a lifelong drug user, you know, if you can avoid a shitty experience, I think objectively, like, we're probably going to want to do that. Yeah. So it's not like a lack of like not wanting to be safe, I think.
Right. And people do it, you know, like I know people who, you know, followed Dead and Company, were following the Dead, and like have a family, and like they take acid and like, you know, candy flip, take acid and ecstasy and like trip balls like when they go see a show, and then they like take care of their family and like do normal people shit, because that's super common.
Yeah.
But we don't want to talk about that, because
that's all the shit that we hide from like our bosses, and like why?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, like those stigmas that we have on drugs, like I really believe they create the environment, or like they create the climate for someone who maybe never would have like experienced a substance use disorder or chaotic substance use to fall into it. Like say somebody like has a job and are supporting their family and like everything's fine, and then they get a drug test from their job and they pop positive for something that they used when they were off work on their own time, and then they lose their job. They can't, you know, relationships start falling apart, they can't support their family, and then like, I mean, there's substances to turn to, you know what I mean? Like these things that we have in our society about drugs, like make it worse for people who use drugs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, I don't know what I'm citing now because it was a while ago, but like a majority of the jobs that are being lost right now, are jobs that men typically do. It's I think truck driving, and then there was I think retail, which is usually middle-aged women. A lot of the times when somebody like loses their job, we can like meme learn to code all we want. A lot of those people aren't ever gonna fucking learn to code. And a lot of the times they fall into deep depressions, and substance use skyrockets. And like, so it's like we can have a certain idea of what a drug user looks like, but like it's people we live with, it's people that we work with, it's people that are fucking ringing our shit up at the store, like, or potentially, right? And like, I don't know, we need to hold space for like that being a thing that we even consider.
And it's okay. But like we also like need to advocate for like being able to like take steps and allow them to like do those things safely, and not like kind of hide those conversations under wrap. Substance use definitely tends to go up like when there's kind of a situation in someone's life. I mean, you kind of alluded to that earlier, like where things seem to get better when like the situation as a whole was better. You know, you were out of like maybe a toxic relationship or like a not healthy situation. I mean, you look at like COVID, like with all the isolation and it's just like a looming anxiety, especially like that first 6 to 9 months. I mean, nobody knew like what it was, and it was just substance use skyrocketed, overdoses went up. I mean, there was a time where we like weren't able to do the same amount of outreach and just the general harm reduction work that we were able to before. So, and I'm sure like other agencies around the country kind of had the same thing, so people didn't have the same access. But other than that, like just in general, I mean, drinking, like people were in their house like alone or just with families stuck in their house, like people that don't have an alcohol issue just started drinking a lot more, like alcohol sales skyrocketed. And I mean, self-medicating for anxiety and stuff.
And and it was especially troubling, not to get too off track, but like being that those are all things that started to skyrocket, like so did like domestic abuse. And it kind of just speaks to like the fact that, we are so, like, even the most spontaneous of us humans, like we're kind of creatures of habit. Like no matter how like chaotic we can be, no matter how like chaotic of lifestyles that we lead, like there are some things that we don't even like consciously think about, but we like depend on some things for some stability.
Sure.
So when that gets like shaken up, and you have to kind of like redefine what stability means to you, for some people, it's like a bottle, because it's there. And it also like, if somebody's never had an issue with like alcohol or any particular substance for that matter, the fact that there is, the availability and then like added stressors and just like the unknown mixed with like new factors. Anytime something new is introduced into the picture, people don't take to change, very well a lot of the times, or, it's not a smooth transition. So it's an unrealistic expectation to think that that's not something that would happen as like a byproduct of a fucking pandemic.
And I mean, like it just should be so that, I mean, that's okay. And, people use substitute, people turn to all sorts of different things, and like maybe some more healthy, some less healthy than others, but whatever we can do to like get through whatever we're experiencing, and to do so safely, and just to be able to have the knowledge and the access to the resources to be able to do like whatever somebody needs to do or feels like they need to do or just wants to do, like in a safe way, not having to risk serious consequences to their health or well-being.
Right, totally. And that's why I'm glad that you like brought up, I don't know what it's called, but like the testing thing.
The reagent testing.
Like even something like that, like just like I knew testing was a thing, but then it's like another thing to be able to be like explain like this is where you can get this and this is how it works. And like I think it's fascinating. I think most drug users probably would, even if they're not maybe the most careful inherently, just to have access to, I think, is really like the first step.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I hear that kind of thing a lot. Like, well, like people may have fentanyl test strips, but like it's not, they probably won't use them, or like it's not going to make a difference. And that's not been my experience. Like frankly, like most of the fentanyl test strips like that we distribute or that like I hand out, pretty much for people who do casually use cocaine or like Xanax or something that like fentanyl comes in contact with and has been found in. Because at this point, like in South Florida, if you're buying heroin, like you're getting fentanyl, and people who are using like illicit opiates are well aware that they're getting fentanyl. But it's the people who, don't know, and that also don't use opiates on a regular basis. Their tolerance is lower. They're at much higher risk.
Definitely.
So, I mean, those things are definitely good to have. And like, it's not true. And people, I know of people who have found out that there's fentanyl in their cocaine and they don't use it, or they are more careful with it. They make sure there's Narcan around. Like,
Mhm.
regardless of the way somebody chooses to react to the information that they're given,
Yeah.
like, it is important that they have all the information to make like a good decision going in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think like, and that's like the whole thing. I think like it's one thing to like just be ignorant to the situation and then have like a tragedy happen,
Mm-hmm.
and then a whole other thing if like you're taking something specifically and you know the risks going into it. Like I think that it shouldn't be, oh, how would I phrase it? Like I think it's up to you to decide what you, like you said, what you want to do with that information, but like you shouldn't be like steered away from getting it. And you should at
Right.
least know that it is out
Right.
there should you want it.
Yeah, it shouldn't be hard to get that
Right,
information,
no,
the
not at
knowledge
all.
that you need to be safe about whatever you're doing.
Totally, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's like a good kind of summary of everything. I mean, like, access is important to like these resources, but also access to the information to be able to like educate yourself about whatever you're using, and to understand like there are steps that you can take to use safely,
Yeah.
more, reducing those risks and
Right.
inherently like the potential consequences that it can have on somebody's life. And
For sure. And I think it's important to know, like, for that to kind of also like come from other people that are using. I think it kind of like hits differently, so to speak,
Sure.
than like from like, some like a authority figure, because especially in like a stimulant community where people are like kind of subject to being maybe a little bit more like hypersensitive or like paranoid, that they're gonna like go to jail if they like admit to using just for the sake of getting like
Right.
a test strip. Like,
right.
I think the delivery is also something that should be like kind of considered,
Yeah.
because like I've heard of so many instances of people just kind of like wanting or being curious of like getting these resources but not wanting to out themselves.
Sure.
Right, so like there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just all comes back to stigma and prohibition and the fact that these things are illegal. And like, that's a lot of people's answer to these resources, like in terms of like the opposition. Like, I don't agree with us having these resources available. I mean, there's states and cities where fentanyl test strips are illegal. Like,
Really?
yeah, it's paraphernalia charge.
Huh.
Yeah, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, like that's
Wild.
one of them. Yeah, it's crazy, right? But like, people look to, well, it's illegal, so it should be illegal to like be able to do so safely because it's illegal, period.
Yeah.
And it's just such like a black and white view of things. And if the real focus is like not just to keep people from using drugs, but to like keep society well and to like keep people safe, which, like, come on, like, the drug war is old. Like, it's a war on drug users, like all of these things that we know, and it's not done like any good. It's a losing battle.
Right,
Like,
for everyone.
it's only caused harm.
Right,
There's
exactly.
nothing positive that's come from it. Nobody is like, I mean, people like get better after being incarcerated, but nobody's life is like made better because people are arrested and criminalized and stigmatized because they use drugs. Like,
Right.
It just doesn't work like that.
And I think it's important to also note that like with things reducing harm for drug users, like it's not only helping drug users or people that like use sparingly or whatever, it affects the entire community, because like
100%.
then there's like the whole conversation about like the spread of disease and all
Yep.
that stuff. So it's like,
Yep.
even if you don't have a loved one that uses drugs, which I doubt it, but even if you don't, you can still be affected by like the negligence of really our society, because it's kind of the way it's been structured thus far. So thank you so much for like even like inviting me to have this conversation, because like really sincerely it's important that people know that it's something that affects everybody. And also, I mean, I don't know, I kind of want to just challenge people to just kind of question their beliefs and like how they want to, what their what their part in it is,
Mm.
because we might think we don't play one, but we kind of all do.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I mean, even if we don't intend to, or I mean, even those of us who are like on like this side of things, like we still all have like our implicit biases because we like grew up in the way that we grew up, and
Yeah.
the societal stigmas that we have and assumptions about drug use.
For
And
sure.
it's there. And so these conversations really like work towards, kind of steering that in a different direction.
Yeah, yeah. And like just to be clear, it's like, yeah, not a matter of like shunning people that like aren't on board. Cause like at some point I wasn't,
Sure.
and like
Yeah.
you might not have been and stuff. So it's like, it's just, yeah, just being open. And like if somebody's actually listened to the entirety of this conversation, I think that's like definitely like a step in like a pretty sweet direction for everybody.
Hell yeah. I agree.
So
Yeah.
thanks so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. I am grateful for you being like honest and willing to share your experience, and like to just kind of give like a peek into like the fact that not everybody's experience is the same. And I hope people
Yeah.
from all walks like see this, and understand that like it doesn't have to be one way or the other, and it's not just in the pits or
Right.
abstinent. Like there's a total nuance to everything, and it's all a spectrum. Like do you identify, just like before we go, like do you identify as a person in recovery of some form?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever like flat out been asked like that. So like that's kind of where the apprehension comes from. But yeah, absolutely. I've recovered from a whole fucking lot, and I'm still working on it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a person in recovery.
Hell yeah. That's what it's all about, man.
Mhm.
Well, thanks, Ivana. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been fun.
Yeah.